Ever felt like you're pouring your soul into someone just to be met with silence? Like no matter how much you care, show up, or stay available, they just keep expecting more without ever giving back. Here's the harsh truth. Most people don't recognize value when it's always within reach. They don't appreciate presence until it turns into absence. But the game changes, everything changes, when you stop showing up, when you stop chasing, when you stop trying to be understood by people who only listen to respond, not to connect. So what really happens when you go silent for real? When you don't just walk away for attention, but walk away for peace? Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to prove your worth to someone who didn't even see you clearly? Have you mistaken silence for indifference when in reality it was just the final boundary being drawn? We've been sold a lie. That if you care, you keep showing up. That if you love deeply, you stay through the confusion, through the inconsistency, through the pain. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most powerful act of self-respect is the quiet departure, the exit without announcement, without revenge, without noise? In this video, we're flipping the script. You're going to discover the psychological unraveling that begins not in your mind, but in theirs, when they realize you're not coming back. Not because you're angry, not because you want to hurt them, but because you've grown into someone who no longer begs to be seen. This isn't about games or manipulation. This is about stoicism. It's about the kind of unshakable self-worth that doesn't need to scream to be heard. This moment right now, this is where it starts. When you stop chasing and they start panicking. When your silence isn't empty, it's powerful. When your stillness isn't passive, it's intentional. What I'm going to show you isn't just a theory. It's a blueprint, a sequence of internal shifts that lead to something far greater than getting them back. It's about getting you back. So stay with me. Because by the end of this video, not only will you understand what really happens when you remove your energy from someone who took it for granted, you'll embody the transformation. What comes next? That's the part they never see coming. Let's begin. 1. They don't notice right away, and that's the first sign. It begins with a curious silence. No storm, no fanfare, just the absence of your usual presence. You stop texting, calling, showing up, and at first, nothing changes. They don't realize anything has shifted, because what they expected to continue, your availability, your patience, your emotional labor, just hasn't ended yet. So they go on with their day, thinking maybe you're busy, maybe there's a glitch, maybe you'll reach out later. Their hearts remain calm, even their egos barely register the absence, because to them you were always there, always expected, always orbiting around their needs. This ignorance is not oversight, it's reliance. They relied on your energy to fill their emotional vacuum, used your attention like currency without checking the balance. They don't notice you're gone because they never thought you would. And that's the point where the power begins to shift, because your disappearance doesn't trigger a reaction, it triggers confusion, the kind of fog that settles in the mind when something familiar is inexplicably missing. At first, they'll tell themselves you're busy or dealing with something important. Maybe this isn't goodbye, it's see you soon. Maybe you'll circle back, check in. But there is no circle, no check-in. Just the stillness of your absence. While they sit in their routine, scanning their phone, expecting a ping from you, each hour that passes becomes an unspoken statement of intent. You didn't reach out. And when they reach out to someone else, reach out to friends, reach out to distractions, every other human interaction becomes a filler that only highlights what's missing. You were the constant. Now your silence emphasizes the gap that was never supposed to exist, but they're not ready to confront it yet. They're still anchored in the belief that they can control or predict your behavior because they always have, until now. In this early phase, your absence is a ghost. They sense something's off, but there's no alarm. They conserve their emotional fuel, assuming this is just a pause in the signal. But what they don't know is that silence isn't a pause, it's a boundary. And it was drawn without fanfare. You didn't cut ties, you just stopped being what they expected. In this fog of ignorance, their ego remains intact. They don't feel shame, they feel curiosity, mild at first, tinged with disbelief. They might check your social media slowly, hesitantly, not out of longing but out of habit. Their thumb scrolls past your feed, checking for activity. You haven't posted. Your usual stories are missing. Maybe you're off the grid. Maybe you've gone somewhere. But the real puzzle is, why didn't you announce it? You didn't ghost with drama. You just exited. And that exit lasts. Time stretches. One day without you is just another day. 2 days is noticeable. 3 becomes uncomfortable. Yet still no alarm bells. That's the brilliance of it. They still don't notice your absence. Not yet. And that's the first sign of power. You don't need to announce. The silence itself is the message. It echoes louder than any mic drop ever could. Consider this. How often have you seen someone dramatic walk away, then stalk your stories, waiting for a reaction? That's noise, that's performance. But silence? Silence is confidence. It doesn't demand a reaction. It simply exists. In the early days, while they're lingering in denial, they assume you'll return. You always did. You were their safety net, their emotional couch, their spam folder of late-night confessions and early morning apologies. They never realized that net had holes, that couch had stains, that their emotional takings left you drained. But in silence, they'll remember. None of that. They'll remember only the routine, the easy access, the just message me. And when they reach for it and you're not there, they feel the absence, and still they might not attribute significance. Maybe you're busy, maybe you're healing, maybe you want space. These interpretations comfort their ego because they can't yet acknowledge the truth that you chose peace over chaos, that you chose yourself over their convenience, and that's the moment the narrative begins to shift. Because your departure wasn't meant to cause drama, it was meant to preserve dignity. It wasn't meant to punish, you didn't lash out, you simply disconnected. And in the quiet, their confusion grows. They start to review your last conversations. They wonder if they missed something. Did they say something? Was there a moment that triggered this? They rewind memories, dissect your last words, searching for clues. And in that replay, regret begins to blossom. Quietly at first, then louder. But still, no realization of loss, just questions, because they don't yet feel the emotional vacuum. They feel the cognitive one, that space where answers should be. And as long as they're searching for answers, they're stuck in your orbit, even without you. They haven't realized your departure was intentional, that your absence wasn't an accident. And that's still the first phase of power, letting their assumptions function like shackles, binding them to your memory. This invisibility cloak you've created, it's not about hiding, it's about protecting. You protect your growth, you protect your boundaries, you protect your peace. They think you're still orbiting because they never considered you might. Actually walk away. And when they realize that when the fog breaks, that's when the panic starts. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The foundation cracks when they admit you didn't just disappear, you left, permanently. And that permanence, that unspoken commitment to self-respect, is the first sting of your quiet revolution. So in this moment, this first phase of absence, they don't just fail to notice, they underestimate. They misread your silence as a glitch instead of a boundary. They mistake your self-care for ambivalence. And they keep drifting in denial, dismissing the significance until the silence screams your absence. And at that point, they realize the spotlight is off, the stage is empty, the show I relied on wrote itself into history, and the leading role walked off. Now they look around, confused. They expected the show to go on, and then the weight of missing you starts to sit heavy in their chest. even before they understand why. Because absence isn't an attack, it's a mirror. And when they finally see themselves in it, that's when the transformation begins, not just for you, but for them, the silent shift. 2. The ego begins to tremble, not the heart. Have you ever stopped to question what truly hurts when someone you care about stops showing up? Is it the ache in your chest or the echo in your mind? Here's what often goes unnoticed. Their heart doesn't break first. Their ego does. You walk away, and their identity stumbles before their emotions ever catch on. Why? Because your presence fed their sense of control. Your reactions reinforced their power. Your availability made them feel needed, and when you disappear, that feeling collapses. In that void, their ego scrambles for stability. In the early days of your absence, they don't experience heartbreak. They feel bewildered. Their routine snaps and their internal narrative unravels. They reach for their phone, ready to bury you in texts or demand answers. But there's nothing, no signal, no reaction badge lighting up. Not because they hurt you, because you were no longer a reflection of their mental playlist. That silence begins digging cracks in their certainty. Did I push too hard? Say the wrong thing? Do something I missed? They ask the silent questions. They replay your moments together, searching for hidden warnings or overlooked cues. They wonder if you're hurt or angry, or if you're just gone. But you're not gone. You just stopped reacting to chaos. And that change shatters their sense of predictability. For someone who thrived off your assurances, off your need to be seen, off your willingness to chase clarity, they suddenly feel untethered. Stoicism teaches that control is the illusion of security. You removing yourself is a breach of that illusion. And when people lose their hold on control, their minds go into survival mode, not emotional, cognitive. They think replaying memories will help. If they can reconstruct the script, they might rewrite the ending, but they can't, because your ending was finalized in silence. This is where the power of Stoic relationships becomes clear. It's not about emotional standoffishness. It's about consistent boundaries. It's not about cruelty. It's about clarity. And clarity, even when silent, tears through the veil of dependence. So they start to quake internally, not crying but questioning. Questions like, what if I lost them? What if it's final? They aren't asking to mourn. They're asking to regain position, control, safety. Their mind races. They check their past. Messages, your old shared photos, even a random like you left 6 weeks ago. In a Stoic relationship, attention is balanced. When you dissolve that pattern, they feel unprepared. They didn't lose someone. They lost their map, so they double down on mental loops. What changed? What did I do wrong? And every unanswered question chips away at their ego's confidence. It's not emotional pain. They're afraid you stopped being of use. They're terrified you slipped through their control. And that's what makes your absence such a disruption. It's not heard by their heart. It's felt under the skin of their identity. In Stoicism, we learn the only true control is your own mindset. By detaching from someone who took your mental energy as a given, you prove that your value isn't dictated by external validation. When they realize they can't provoke a response, that your absence is purposeful, you've recalibrated the balance. You're no longer on their emotional leash, and that terrifies them. They'll try to reassert dominance with small gestures, a random text, a vague Instagram story, or a casual, "Hey, how have you been?" But don't be deceived. This isn't curiosity. This is control looking for a foothold, disguised as concern. It's their ego crawling back, searching for familiar ground. And this is exactly when Stoic relationships teach you to stay unmoved. Not out of spite, but out of discipline. Let their fragile ego quake. You promised peace to yourself. You promised growth. You promised to stop feeding emotional addictions. And now that you honor yourself over someone else's emotional comfort zone, you embody true stoicism. You keep building, you keep growing, you keep moving forward. Your trajectory is no longer tied to someone who couldn't respect your pause. Now ask yourself, can you sit with peace and stillness even when their ego scrambles? Can you hold your ground when their insecurity tries to pull you back into the drama? This is the threshold where self-control whispers louder than emotional triggers. And when you pass it, you're not only free, you're unshakable. The irony of breaking free from chaos is this: the moment they lose grip is the moment you find your center. Your epicenter doesn't tremble because someone trembles inside, because Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a framework for relationship sovereignty. When they realize your disappearance wasn't emotional weakness, but emotional strategy, their trembling confirms your transformation, and that's transformative power. It's proof of Stoic relationships at work, calm in chaos, stillness in storm. So when that happens, remember this: you didn't break their heart, you dismantled their need to hold yours. You didn't close communication, you opened a path to self-respect. You didn't walk away to harm, you walked toward peace. And if this part of the journey resonates, if it hits deeper than the usual advice, if it shifts something inside, you, like this video and comment number 1, so I know it's landing. Hit subscribe for more exploration into building boundary-driven lives rooted in stoicism, growth, and unshakable self-worth. 3. Obsession sets in, silence becomes haunting. Have you ever wondered what truly occurs when silence morphs into haunting? When your absence no longer fades into the background but becomes the epicenter of their thoughts? There's a powerful transformation that occurs, not in the one who leaves, but in the one left behind. Initially, they may mistake your quiet for a temporary respite, a break, or even deliberate drama. But soon enough, the silence shifts. It lingers, it becomes deafening. Look closely. No more noise, no emotional chaos to distract them, no breadcrumbs of reassurance, just solitude and emptiness, a void where your voice once resonated. It might start innocuously. A lingering glance at your old messages, a hesitated finger hovering over your social media handle, the instinct to check if you're online. That internal tug grows until their thoughts no longer wander. They fixate. In that fixated state, obsession begins to rise. They replay your last interaction in slow motion, analyzing every syllable, sentence, and silence. Was that a try for more? They ask themselves. Did I miss a sign? Could I fix this? It's not love at work. It's control turned desperate. They want to understand, to regain their footing, to reconstruct the missing piece. Their mind becomes a labyrinth of what if and if only, slipping into the shadows of regret. You don't need to stalk their pages. You already occupy every corner of their mental space, uninvited, persistent, unavoidable. In Stoicism, we recognize that people crave certainty, boundaries, predictability. By walking away, you remove their roadmap. Without clear paths or signals, their mind begins to wander until it hits walls. They spend nights rewinding conversations, searching for closure that never existed. They might even tell themselves, "This is strength. I'm just trying to understand." But it's far from that. It's obsession, an echo chamber trapped inside their head. Because in Stoic relationships, silence isn't empty. It's full of your boundaries, your values, your clarity. But when they tune into silence expecting answers, they only find themselves. And that self-confrontation without a guide is uncomfortable. The curiosity becomes fixation. The regret morphs into motivation to reconnect. They want to break the silence. They crave the message they've come to expect. Yet every effort rebounds off your boundary. That absence amplifies until every quiet moment becomes a loud reminder of what they lost. They begin to question every flirty memory, every shared secret, every unsent "I miss you." You don't have to return. Their obsession fuels itself. It grows stronger because of the unknown. And that's the paradox. Silence magnifies presence, because when they possessed you, they overlooked you. When you withdrew, they couldn't escape you. In the empty space you left behind, they projected their desires, their insecurities, their longing. The louder the silence, the heavier their thoughts drift into analysis, yet no answer comes, and that's what drives them wild. At first, this might feel like victory to them. They think if they can just solve the silence, they can bring you back. Maybe one message, maybe an apology, maybe a shared memory, maybe a small joke with emotional weight. But you don't respond, because you've realized that healing and stoicism lies not in proof or apology, but in unwavering presence in your own life. Their obsession becomes their burden. They anticipate a reply that never arrives. Their hope spirals into frustration. Their longing morphs into resentment, not toward you, but toward themselves, for misreading your value, for wrecking a connection, for failing to protect what you meant. In that mental battleground lives chaos, and no one else is there. Only them, their echoes, and the haunting absence of what once was. This self-fueled anguish is far more potent than anything you could say. Nothing breaks someone's control like not responding to any attempt, any feeling, any plea. No words, no justification, no call. That silence is your fortress. It's not passive, it's a strategy. And in it, your value becomes a question they cannot unanswer. In Stoic Relationships, we say, control what you can, your actions, your boundaries, your growth, and detach from what you cannot, others' responses, regrets, or resentments. By withdrawing from their mental hold, you force them to confront their own psychology, and that confrontation, without your voice, without their scripts, is terrifying. Because you're not there to rescue, to soothe, to explain. You're gone, permanently, and their mind knows it. The obsession that seeds in that vacuum is just regret disguised as attachment. Their quest to decode your silence is nothing more than a desperate search for agency, something they lost when you withdrew. But here's the truth. Such self-inflicted obsession reveals far more about them than it ever will about you. Their fixation is a reflection of their own unmet needs, their own lack of boundaries, their own fear of losing control. And the more they chase the silence, the more they drown in the emptiness of a story that has already been closed. Meanwhile, you stand free, not because you shut them out, but because you shut yourself in, with purpose, discipline, self-respect. And though they're trapped inside their own mental echo chamber, you're outliving. You're moving forward. You're building. You're becoming. That's the power of Stoicism in action. When you stop explaining, you embody. When you stop reacting, you speak. When you walk away, you win. Not by drama, not by reaction, but by your transformation. And that's why you'll never see the direct impact. They'll never say, "You haunt me." Instead, they'll wonder, question, spiral, all without your energy. And that's when you win. In your stillness, in your silence, in your growth, you've given them the only thing more potent than any argument, the freedom to see themselves without your reflection. And they can't handle it because what we can't control, we obsess over. And that's where healing starts for both parties. But that healing only begins when you decide silence is not empty. It's the space where boundaries stand strong, growth becomes unstoppable, and Stoic relationships find their truth. Before, they mistook your warmth for weakness. Now they feel the cold. In the start of any deep connection, your warmth, your empathy, patience, generosity is typically mistaken for weakness, a sign that you'll be forever available, forever forgiving, forever waiting. In Stoic relationships, we learn that warmth is a strength, not a permission slip to take advantage of, but people accustomed to taking often forget this. So they misinterpret your kindness as dependency, your consistency as codependency, your compassion as an obligation. And when you don't, just dial it down, but switch it off entirely. The shock reverberates deeper than any argument ever could. It's not cold, it's clarity enforced by learned boundaries, and yet to them, it feels colder than ice. Think back, how often did your warmth unclog their pain? How many late-night calls, supportive reassurances, crisis texts? It was always you showing up, and so they built the assumption that you would always be there, that their emotional vacuum would always be underwritten by your energy. In that assumption, they found comfort, control, a predictable pattern, comfortable until it wasn't. You don't announce withdrawal, you remove your signal without interference. And they feel the room change temperature. They sense the warmth evaporate, but they don't realize it's gone until they shiver. The cold sets in when reality hits. No more messages, no more check-ins, no more those signature kindnesses that had grown predictable and thus taken for granted. That's the true sting of your withdrawal. Not guilt, not drama, not confrontation. It's absence with a silent dignity. They walk into the room expecting an embrace. Instead, there's stillness. They open their phone and remember your name, but there's nothing new. No message, no video, no sign of how you're doing. That contrast between what they expected and what actually exists pierces deeper than any argument about who forgot whose birthday. And what's worse is they realize they don't get to heat the room back up. Not you who decides the temperature until you choose to. Their attempts, texting jokes, sending memes, dropping emojis, feel hollow because they're no longer in context. You're not the person who they gave comfort to. You're the person who gave comfort until you didn't. And that is overwhelming. And suddenly your warmth, once taken lightly, feels like something rare that they no longer possess. And they start questioning themselves. Was I ever really enough? Did I truly deserve that empathy I took so easily? They feel the void, but they can't fill it. You have boxed yourself not into ice, but into emotional sovereignty. Not unfeeling, just resolved. They've traded the comfort of your consistency for the sting of your indifference. They don't hate it, they resent it, because they loved the ease. They thrived on the surety of you being there, but they never cared for the reason behind your being there. Self-respect, pride, discipline. Cold to them became chaos, but to you it was evolution. In Stoicism, we don't confuse empathy with obligation, compassion with need. And you didn't withdraw warmth to punish, you withdrew it to preserve. To affirm that love isn't an expendable resource, it's earned. And when they realized they lost it, they didn't just miss your warmth, they felt their own inadequacy. That's where the true power lies. Not in punishing, but in redeeming yourself through silence. Not in anger, but in boundary. And the cold you embody isn't spite, it's clarity and self-schooling. As your warmth became invisible, a void of expectation forms, not of them losing you entirely, but losing control over you. Not that they didn't know you, they just forgot that your warmth wasn't theirs to claim. Now, in the absence of it, they scramble to rebuild, but have nothing to rent. Their attempts at reconnection feel forced, hollow, like reheated conversation. In an empty room, they realize no amount of reminders can recreate the clarity, the self-respect, the calm confidence that your early warmth once hinted at. They feel that with every second your absence consumes, and they tremble, not from guilt, but from the cold realization that the thing they built their world around, your commitment to them, was never unconditional. It had conditions: respect, mutual care, consistent appreciation for themselves. And when that consistency disappeared, they recognized it wasn't your devotion that faltered, it was their privilege that expired. They didn't lose access to a person, They lost access to an energy they monetized, and the ledger has closed. That's why this shift feels like execution, even when it wasn't designed as one. The stoic distance you held, quiet, steady, unmoving, did not scream. It reflected. It forced them to see themselves in your absence. And absence, once nuanced, shifts into blunt messaging. So many people mistake warmth as weakness until it vanishes without fanfare, leaving behind nothing but the echo of what used to be. And the strange thing is, you never said a word. You didn't lecture them. You simply reconstructed what you valued, and they watched from the outside. They cannot perform to your boundaries. They cannot charm back the cost of respect. They traded for convenience. And maybe they'll try, "Hey, I miss you," or "I just thought you'd want to talk." But those words lack heat. You built a firewall, not a wall. Not about revenge, but about the sanctity of your energy. And their attempts to pierce it only fill you with more resolve. In Stoicism, they say that space is critical. Between stimulus and response lies choice. You choose silence. They feel stimulus, loneliness, regret, confusion, but have no response from you. They ruminate, and your stillness just amplifies their reflection. What are they missing? What ignorances led to this breach? Do they even remember your warmth, or just how easily they exploited it? These questions haunt them, and that's the point. The absence of warmth is not aggression. It's a magnet for reflection. And while they melt in the feeling of lacking, you're freezing out the toxicity of being taken for granted. You're not cruel, you're resilient. And by feeling their cold, you validate your warmth, but only on your terms, only within your own values. Then when you're ready, if ever, to re-engage, you'll re-enter on your own terms. Exactly the stoic relationship paradigm you live by. Warmth not as license, care not as currency. So now they shiver, surrounded by the chill of recognition that easier warmth can't be reinstated at will. They realize the irony. What they once dismissed is now what they crave and require. That's the moment your withdrawal becomes their mirror. A mirror they still can't look away from, because what surrounds them is their own absence of appreciation. Now, if this insight resonates, if it challenges your assumptions around empathy, boundaries, emotional reciprocity, like the video and comment number 1, so others can benefit from this reflection on stoic relationships and the clarity that comes from determined self-respect. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into stoic philosophy applied to emotional sovereignty, personal power, and boundary-built connection. 5. When you go cold, they start to burn. There's a moment when your warmth fades into stillness, and that is the moment their comfortable fire extinguishes, leaving them in a sudden emotional freeze that not only shocks, but forces an internal reckoning. They never realize how hot your presence burned until it cools, and when you go cold, that's when they truly begin to burn. Because people who are accustomed to being fueled by your loyalty, fueled by your attention, fueled by your emotional consistency, they don't just feel heat, they get addicted to it. And when that flame drops, it's not just absence. They experience frostbite in their spirit, a painful realization that you've removed the oxygen of your availability. In stoic relationships, we talk about aligning energy, not handing it away as a commodity. So when you withdraw your energy, you're not cruel, you're choosing sovereignty. But to them, it feels like abandonment, and burning begins not in your chest but in theirs. And it burns slower, fiercer. It's the heat of regret, discomfort, and the desperate urge to thaw your frostiness. They open your chat, nothing new. They check your status, nothing posted. They remember your laugh, your late-night voice notes, your reassurance in crisis, and now, just emptiness. That emptiness burns more than any verbal conflict or emotional release could, because pain can be comforting in its familiarity. Silence, calm, and your cold neutrality. That's disarming. They crave reignition. They want to spark something. But all you gave was a calm refusal to melt, not a punishment, just a boundary enforced in your value system. So they start to burn, not with passion, but with the ache of missing permission. I'm still worth your fire. That ache becomes urgency. They think, if I text something clever, maybe I'll get a laugh. If I joke, I'll break the ice. If I share something deep, maybe I can earn my warmth back. But every attempt collides with the cold you've chosen, and their internal furnace struggles to relight. They begin to glance inward more than at you. They wonder if they ever deserved your heat, your presence, your defense. That inward self-scrutiny done in the absence of sparks is what causes burning in the psyche, an emotional friction born from regret. In Stoicism, they'd call it an encounter with reality. When you can't control another's reaction, all you can control is your own character. You chose character over comfort. They didn't prepare for that. So now, when they remember the moments you were there, they feel the sting of their own inconsistencies. They think, I didn't see their worth until they vanished. They burn with remorse. And that regret is colder than any warmth. You can't fix regret with words, only with consistent presence. And you withdrew yours. Furthermore, when you go cold, they start to burn because they realize you didn't need to explain your departure. You just disappeared. Mystery intensifies emotional cold. It leaves them grappling not just with their loss, but with the question of power that you reclaimed. In Stoic relationships, that power is internal. You lost the need to explain, the need to justify, the need to be heated for someone else. By stepping away from emotional currency, you become a question they can't answer. What changed? Was I enough? Could I have given more? But these questions echo in their soul, not your silence. That echo can burn with the agony of missed opportunity and irrevocable choice. In polar contrast to emotional chaos, where conflict, drama, tears, and apologies swirl, coldness is a centering fortress. No performances, no fuel, no reaction except neutrality. Neutrality burns far more than criticism. It reveals that no matter how much they tried, they couldn't bend you. And that is existential discomfort. In Stoic relationships, this is the turning point, when your absence forces them to encounter their own unfinished growth, self-talk, unmet responsibility, and emotional debts. They burn with the fire of confrontation, with their ego's absolution. They once thrived on your heat. They needed proof through your engagement. Now that proof is gone, and the fire of their own powerlessness ignites. They feel weak, reactive, uncontrolled. And that burning sensation is their consciousness being scorched, not by your anger, but by your calm. Because calmness is an incendiary, weapon against entitlement. So they burn in the truth. They took your heat for granted. If you are there because you want to be, not because you must, they graduate from gratitude to growth. When you graduate, they burn at their own inertia. However, this burn only sustains until they decide to learn or chill. They can either reheat their respect or spiral colder in resentment. If they decide to grow, the burn becomes purification, a release from their patterns and your cycle. If not, the burn becomes an endless and painful replay of what they've lost. In either case, their burning is inevitable. They cannot avoid it because your cold eliminated their escape valve. They have nowhere to go. The warmth they miss is the mirror they didn't respect, and that mirror burns them from the inside out until they either heal or continue to scorch in unquenchable sorrow. Meanwhile, you exist in calm. You're self-sufficient, unwavering, resolute. In Stoic relationships, that's the ultimate testament. When someone fires all their arguments and regrets at you, and you stand firm in silent integrity, your presence no longer needs to be explosive, and they burn to realize it. Not through your words, but through your stillness, not through your anger, but through your non-reaction. And in that space, they're forced to self-reflect or continue self-flagellating, and neither is your concern. Because your fire is internal, not external. Your value doesn't depend on their warmth, but they'd burn to remember that. And so their burning is final. It doesn't mark your defeat, it marks their reckoning. They must choose, grow or get consumed. And whatever they do, it no longer changes your direction. Your journey continues inward, upward, and unwavering beyond their flame. That's the real paradox of Stoic relationships and self-respect. The colder you grow, the more your integrity lights your path, leaving no room for them to burn along with you. 6. You didn't vanish to prove a point. You vanished to rebuild. When you choose to walk away, people assume it's a dramatic statement, a calculated punishment, or a game of emotional chess. But in reality, your departure isn't theater. It's the first stone laid on your new foundation. It's not about manipulating their reaction. It's about reclaiming your narrative. You didn't vanish to show them what they lost. You vanished because you were tired of losing yourself in the process. For far too long, you sacrificed peace, mental clarity, and emotional bandwidth, trying to prove value to people who never fully appreciated it. And so this departure, it wasn't a performance, it was a shift from codependence to autonomy, from reaction-driven emotional chaos to discipline-led inner mastery. Stoic relationships thrive not on drama, but on direction. They aren't built on emotional transactions, but on mutual growth. Yet when one person refuses to transact anymore, when they stop trading emotional labor for emotional validation, it shatters the system. That's when reconstruction begins. Quietly, intentionally, far from the noise of expectations. How often did you catch yourself justifying why you stayed? Explaining the excuses? Begging for acknowledgement? Each justification chipped away at your peace. You stayed hoping they'd wake up, thinking, if only they understood how much I give. But they never did, because your gift became conditional. Loans, not investments, signed by guilt, not gratitude. And when you stopped giving coldly, calmly, with purpose, that silence became not a test for them, but a reset for you. While they scramble to catalog their loss, you start laying bricks. Not public display bricks, but personal infrastructure. Pulling back to heal, redirecting your energy to your craft, your habits, your health. Reading Stoic works, redefining boundaries, building habits that serve you instead of serving their unmet expectations. You don't vanish to punish, you vanish to restore, to yourself. You begin healing from the inside out. Repairing wounds emotional labor inflicted, restoring values you sacrificed, rediscovering what it feels like to breathe without a performance clutching at your ribs. You rebuild a life where peace is the engine and progress is the driver, and you do it quietly. No self-help posts, no motivational quotes for their consumption. You restore your rhythm in silence. You heal in action. You rebuild in private. Let them wonder if you're okay. Let them see your calm instead of your crash. Let them sense your direction instead of your drama. While they're asking what changed, where did they go, you're busy answering a bigger question. Who are you without all that noise? Stoicism teaches that character cannot be given. It must be forged, and that forging doesn't happen in spotlight. It happens in solitude, in purpose pursued without external applause, in boundaries sharpened through repeated practice. And that's exactly why defense is more powerful than offense. Because rebuilding without an audience means you're not doing it for validation, you're doing it for self-respect. Step by step, habit by habit, brick by brick, you transform your identity from someone who chased to someone who chooses, from someone who needed to be seen to someone who recognizes that self-value is not up for negotiation. They will eventually catch glimpses of this rebuilt version. Maybe a healthier selfie, a quiet achievement, a shift in tone in your stories. But that's not why you rebuild. You rebuild because being the person who walks away with dignity is more meaningful than bringing them back with words. So if you're rocketing forward in silence, if your rebuild is internal, not performative, if filling your own cup no longer feels selfish, feel the power. Let your stillness speak. Let your growth echo. You're not cold, you're clear. You didn't disappear to prove a point. You disappeared to be the point. If this resonates, if you feel the momentum of reconstruction, like this video and comment number 1 so it lifts someone else's journey, and subscribe for future deep dives into Stoic relationships, self-worth based on action, and the reconstruction of identity beyond emotional echoes. As we move into the final stretch of this journey, watching what changes when someone realizes you're not coming back, we arrive at the point of synthesis, where every internal shift, every moment of silence, every reclaimed ounce of self-respect culminates in a profound transformation. You began by stepping away, not to hurt, but to create space. You didn't vanish to punish. They misread warmth as weakness. They burned when the cold of your clarity hit them. They trembled when your ego didn't chase. And now, here in the quiet aftermath, you've rebuilt from the wreckage of emotional overextension into the sanctuary of your own sovereignty. This conclusion isn't the end. It's the reflection of everything you've excavated, refocused, and repurposed. Imagine a ship departing the harbor. The individuals left behind watch the silhouette disappear against the horizon. At that moment, the ship isn't just gone. It becomes a symbol of what was, what could have been, and what will never return. Similarly, your departure, quiet, unannounced, resolute, becomes more than a withdrawal. It becomes a testament to prioritizing self-regard over emotional availability, to choosing peace over performative presence, to aligning actions with values rather than fears. These values are the compass of Stoicism. They are steadfast, unyielding, internal, and immune to emotional tides. When they realize you're not coming back, they're confronted not with cruelty, but with conclusion, that your journey is no longer theirs to direct. Throughout this process, you maintained no loud exits, no emotional gaslighting, no dramatic revelations, just steady distance. In Stoic relationships, distance isn't abandonment, it's recalibration. You recalibrated your worth around your boundaries, not their projections. Every ounce of your quiet departure forced them to face the emptiness they accepted in your place. They were used to having your warmth, but never learned to respect its value. They counted on your response, but never learned to value your initiative. Their internal reckoning, triggered by your Stoic silence, is not about hate or heartbreak. It's a recognition that they mistook convenience for loyalty, presence for entitlement, your kindness for guarantee. And now, standing on the far side of that reckoning, you encounter something deeper than relief. You encounter integrity. Integrity isn't the absence of temptation. It's the presence of alignment with your self-knowledge. You chose to walk away because staying no longer aligned with what you knew to be true, that your energy was sacred, not transactional, that your presence needed to be earned, not automatic, that love doesn't require martyrdom, it requires reciprocity. What you walked away from were the toxic echoes of emotional imbalance, from expectations not grounded in shared effort, from relationships built on the premise that one-sided sacrifice is sustainable. But this isn't just reflection, it's liberation. Every unseen hour spent rebuilding, every moment of stillness where you refused to explain, every ritual of self-care performed solely for you had compounding effect. It wasn't populist, it was quiet work, hidden growth. As you rebuilt yourself, in solitude, you forged resilience, and resilience is the accrual of small choices, consistent, daily, internal. Over time, those choices fold into new patterns, new confidence, new dignity, and they congregate in your posture, not in what you say, but how you carry yourself. Not in the image you post, but in the silence you hold. When people afterward look back and say, "I don't know what the shift was, but they changed," that's the result. They changed because the narrative shifted from someone who gave to a person who stands on their own giving terms. That quiet evolution cuts deeper than drama ever could. This is the essence of emotional stoicism, when you cloth your liberation in conviction, not noise. When you exit a relationship not with vengeance, but with validation. When you leave not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And that necessity isn't external, it is born from self-preservation, self-respect, personal sovereignty. What remains, what endures, is your personal upgrade. The silent vessel carrying the weight of your lessons, carrying the knowledge that love doesn't require loss of function. It requires freedom for both parties to engage on equal footing. The silence you leave behind becomes not an absence, but an opportunity for them to see what they forfeited, for you to inhabit what you deserve, for both to reflect on the price of control versus the value of connection. For them, walking into your silence prompts introspection, and change for them might be seeking it or resenting it. But for you, walking into your own evolving life means leaning into purpose, not regret, and let this be your lesson. A quiet departure doesn't conclude with escape. It begins with embrace. Embrace of inner harmony, acceptance of boundaries, acknowledgement of self-worth, pursuit of your path. When they realize you're not coming back, let that realization stand as the monument of what's possible when self-respect leads. You're not closing a door with bitterness. You're opening futures with clarity. You're not silencing for spite. You're growing in subtlety. You're not escaping. You're evolving. This journey, marked by silence, boundaries, rebuilds, becomes the epicenter of your new identity, a more centered, self-reliant, stoic you. And for all the times there was internal conflict, uncertainty, or questioning of worth, you'll emerge not just unstuck, but unshakable. In that emergence lies freedom. The freedom from needing to explain yourself, to validate your value, to chase connection under the guise of love. So close this chapter knowing it doesn't end, it opens. Open to new connections sparked from intentionality, open to relationships held in authenticity, free from the gravitational pull of old patterns. When people notice you're not coming back, not as betrayal, but as boundary, they'll stand in the consequences of their choices. But you'll stand in the liberation of yours, unstoppable, compassionate, and quietly transformed.